Hun, do you know what the most abused piece of equipment on the homestead is?
What's the most abused equipment on the homestead?
The wheelbarrow.
Why the wheelbarrow?
Because you give it crap and push it around.
Hi, and welcome to Suburban Life Permaculture. I'm Holly, and today we're going to talk about 7 viability tests for seeds. The first way to test the viability of your seeds is going to be the inspection test. And for today, we're going to, whenever we can do an example, some we won't be able to, and I'll explain why, but we're going to be using some scallion seeds that we harvested from our garden. Thank you, Miss Rebecca. So all you do for this test is you just look at the seeds. Do they look as you expect? Are they, way off in color, way off in shape? If they are, then those are most likely not viable. If they're super small, it might just be a portion of a seed and not the whole complete seed that would be needed for growing. You want to use your experience with this, right? So if you're familiar with the seeds, you're going to look at the seeds based on that experience. But let's say you don't have a whole lot of experience. Do research. Look at common pictures on the internet to base that on. Or you can just rely on one of our other 6 viability tests. Let's talk about the pros of the inspection test. It's fairly simple, not invasive, and pretty, honestly, I actually do this while I'm collecting the seeds, and if anything looks off, I just throw it where I'm at, and if it happens to be viable, yay, we have a volunteer there. The cons for this particular test is that looks can be deceiving, and it takes some regular time and attention to. Second seed viability test is the water bath test, and honestly, that's our favorite. We use it a lot. What you need is a container full of water, hence the bath, and then your seeds. And you just sprinkle them on here. Sometimes I give it a little zhuzh, and you wait about 15 minutes. The ones that you want, the viable ones, will actually sink to the bottom. And I don't know if you can see that, but you already have some starting to sink. Been about 15 minutes, so you can see we have several, but we do have a lot that did not sink at all. But what you're going to do is just skim off the seeds that float, because you want the sinkers. The sinkers are not stinkers. And then you're just gonna, you can compost them or just throw them on the ground. They're going to become biomass or volunteer. The pros of this test, it's quick, easy, simple. The cons are that when you're done, unless you're planting them right that day, or maybe the next day, because you can let seeds soak overnight, the con would be you have to dry them out if you want them to remain viable for, let's say, a few months or the next growing season. Third seed viability test is the germination test. So do you remember when you were in school and they gave you, for us it was a bean, and we put a damp paper towel inside a Ziploc baggie, and then you put your seeds. It's very, very similar, except that you can still use a Ziploc baggie, but we use a damp towel just on a paper plate. Honestly, you could do it on the paper plate with a paper towel, that's fine. and some sort of dampness, and then you lay the seeds on it. And if they germinate, then they're viable. When you do this test, you have your damp towel or damp paper towel, and you're either going to cover it with another one or put it under a layer of that. Now, the pros to this test is that it's pretty simple to do, and you'll know right away. And if you plant them shortly after you see the sprouts, you can still use the seeds. But if you're not planning on planting them soon, then those seeds are no longer going to be viable. Cons for the germination test is that you'll have to plan to plant those seeds right away if you do plan on using them. But the other thing is it does take a little bit of time and, of course, attention. You're not going to want to forget it. If it's not continually damp, it's an issue. So if it dries out, then you don't know, unless you see little remains of the germination, whether they were viable or not. So it does take a little bit more time and attention than the other tests. The next seed viability test is the seedling test. And literally you're just creating seedlings. So you're just going to put your little seeds in your pot. And it's just a direct sow into your pot. You could direct sow into your garden, but then you're just planting rather than doing a test. This test actually allows you to see that, yes, this is a viable plant, that now I can take this start and put it in my garden. And the pros to this test is that it really doesn't take much effort, and you actually have seedlings ready to go into your garden if they grow. What I do is I do a whole tray of them. This way I have a bunch of those seedlings to go into my garden at once, rather than, oh, I tested it, now let me do more. It may take a little bit for it to sprout, so this way I have a whole bunch, or just a few, depending on how viable the seeds are. It does take some time and attention, so that's one of the cons. And another part is that let's say you want to have 10 plants, and you do even a whole tray of them. If the seeds are not a viable batch, you may only get 1 or 2 or none, and that means you're going to have to do another test run if you're then going to go ahead and put them in your garden. Another con to this method is that it has varying success rates, but you do know what is growing is going to be good, and then you can transplant it to the garden. Now, transplanting itself does carry a little bit of shock to it, but then any transplant would. The fifth viability test is going to be the wind test. And you either have to have a special piece of equipment for it. A lot of seed stock nurseries, they have something like this for their seed viability. Not that that's the only thing that they may use, but that's where I've seen it most. And they have a special piece of equipment that is sitting near a fan, and you pour the seed in, and the fan blows, and anything that gets blown out, just like the water bath test, has to do with that weight or maybe mass, and those lighter ones that may not have all the parts inside the seed get blown out, and what you get left with is that viable seed. Now, another way to do that, if you don't have that equipment, is you could have a low flat dish. Depending on how many seeds you have, you may not want something like this. This is rather small, but since I don't do this test, I don't actually have a low, wide, huge flat dish to be able to do that, but you're going to have a fan set up, probably outside rather than inside. You're going to have chaff and little bits of things blowing around, and non-viable seeds, but you're going to set that up with in the wind if you have a nice wind going, or with a fan, and you're just going to just almost like you're flipping pancakes. You're just going to do a little where they're rising up and the fan can blow through, and then they're going back down into your dish. Now, another method is you've got your fan set up, and let's say you've got your seeds in here and you just pour it. Be careful you're not pouring it from too high a height, but enough where the fan is blowing between you and the jar, and then you just gently pour them into your dish, the lighter pieces then being flown away. One of the cons to this test is it could be really pricey if you decide to buy that special machinery, but if you're testing thousands and thousands of seeds, it might be worth it to you. It could take some practice using the bowl method, a little less if you're just pouring it in, but if you're using the bowl method without pouring the seeds in, with the fan, it's going to take some practice getting it moving, kind of like you're panning for gold, only you're panning for those viable little nuggets of seed. Last two tests I will never do, and truly it's more scientific seed viability test. The first one is the cutting test. So with that, you're going to take your seeds, and then you're going to take an X-Acto knife and you are going to cut it, and then especially with a seed that looks like this, it's super tiny, you're going to look at it under magnification and then see if you can identify that all the parts are there to make it viable seeds. The final test is the infrared thermography. The last one is the infrared
Thermography?
The last test is the infrared thermography test. Since I'm never ever going to do this test, the specs I am not going to memorize, so I will read it to you. The items that you'll need is an infrared thermal camera, digital color CCD camera, directional light source, constant temperature, which is an incubator, so a constant temperature incubator, thermostatic water bath, and computer. So the pros of this is it's just another way if you don't like the other ways. The only con is the cost is prohibitive for most people. In the comments below, go ahead and share with us what your favorite way to test seed viability is. And I don't care if you like, subscribe, or share. You do you. Carpe diem, y'all.